So, welcome everyone to February's first Friday with two thought leaders. So excited for everyone to be here. My name is Janice Kaye. I'm the co-founder of Corentus, and the other co-founder of Corentus is going to be doing our coherence moment um, this this morning or this afternoon or this evening or wherever you may be in the world. He is in a car on a way back from a client gig. And with that, I give you Alexander.
Thank you, Janice. Can everybody hear me?
All good.
Am I good? I'm good. Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to do just a short exercise like we like to do at the beginning of our little sessions. And I would just request that everybody just sit back and relax. And we'll just do a little bit of breathing. Keep it simple. Then a gratitude piece, and then we'll be good to go. So everybody sit back, relax. Feel free to close your eyes if you're so inclined. And just take a deep breath. Take a nice, long, deep breath. Fill your lungs. Don't be shy. Exhale. Take a second breath. Exhale. Let's do just a third. Great. And just engage a rhythmic breathing pattern for a minute. Just find your own rhythm. Be conscious and intentional about the breath coming in and the breath going out. And as you engage this conscious rhythmic breathing, just tap into your heart and ask yourself what you're grateful for today. What are you grateful for? And as you feel the gratitude, just allow that to enter your breath in and your breath out, and breathe in and out that gratitude. Okay. Short and sweet. Hope that was helpful. And back to you, Janice.
So this is a private community event for people who are in our global community of professionals advancing team effectiveness. These are just some of the places in which we have trained practitioners, we've engaged practitioners, and our clients who will be joining us today. And here is the URL for our community platform as a reminder. I'm very excited to bring you our two thought leaders today, Jen Cohen and Nilesh Parikh. Jen is a seasoned leadership and organizational coach and consultant with over 30 years of experience, specializing in guiding leaders through uncertainty and rapid change, using a multidisciplinary approach that integrates somatics, neuroscience, and systems. As co-founder and director of Seven Stones Leadership, she has designed and led transformative leadership programs globally, working with top executives, prestigious institutions, and Fortune 500 companies. Nilesh is an organizational leadership consultant, executive coach, and team effectiveness coach, currently serving as director of Seven Stones Leadership and co-head of its financial services practice. Drawing on a unique blend of experience from executive roles at Merrill and UBS to somatic body work with the Strozzi Institute, he helps leaders cultivate embodied presence, sharpening their focus, and achieve sustained embodied change. So with that, I bring you Jen and Nilesh.
Thank you, Janice. Good to be with you, as anything. So before we dive into this conversation deeply, when Jen and I were talking about being with this group, we realized that it's easy to skip past so much of what actually informs the work that we do, when in fact, the way in which we work has a lot of, there's a lot that undergirds the way in which we approach every modality we work in, one-on-one, team, or organization. So a couple things about who we are beyond what Janice said. So we are, I call us like a sister firm of Corentus, and we're mostly US based. We're also all over. And Jen and Gina founded Seven Stones Leadership Group, and I'm like the third wheel in that marriage, so to speak. I left my corporate career a few years ago and had the privilege of meeting them during a Corentus Team Foundations coaching course, and then I went on to do the, full certification program and practicum and all of that. So excited to be kind of the bridge between two worlds in this particular conversation. So Jen, I really feel like you are the domain expert in this space, and so I'd love to ask you a bunch of questions. And the first place I wanted to start was to ask you, when we work with teams or in any context, there's a bunch of things, as I mentioned before, that undergird our work. Can you talk a little bit about those distinctions, beliefs, framework, lenses?
Lovely to be with you. Hi, thanks for having me here. There are lots of things that are assumptions or beliefs that we hold about humans, about transformation and change. So we could take the whole time just talking about those assumptions, but we're going to go laser and just say that we being the royal we, the Seven Stones philosophy, where we always look, no matter whether we're serving an individual or serving a group or serving a team or serving a larger system, we look through three lenses. We look at people personally, their own system, and we'll get into that more, their own nervous system, their psychological, physiological, neurological, spiritual system. We look interpersonally, but what happens between beings. And we look structurally at the larger organizational system and the larger context in which we're all operating. And we're always taking all four of those levels into consideration all three of those levels into consideration at all times. The other thing I'll say is that we have a way we tend to move people, again, whether we're working with an individual, a team, etc., that we hold loosely, but we always have in the background. We are always inviting people to think about the context. I said that before, but we live in an acontextual narrative, me, myself, and I. And we live in an ahistorical narrative, and it's getting more and more so. And context, we say, is decisive. It's decisive of the present, and it's a way of shaping the future. If we do not understand the context and the way the context has shaped literally just about everything about us, we'll be missing a huge way of orienting to humans. The second, so we expand, it's like a fan, we expand that whole domain of understanding, you could say, about what context is, how we're operating within it, how it's shaped us, how it's shaped our bodies, how it's shaped our minds, how it's shaped the way we organize our organizations, our teams, our society. Then we invite people to think about the context they'd like to be living in. We say in our work that leaders invent contexts. They invent the future. And so we're completely shaped and sort of consumed by context, and we're context creators. So we look at both elements of context, or both sides of that coin. And part of moving from simply being shaped by context to being a context creator is a process of letting go. Letting go of old shapes, if we're talking about somatics, letting go of old beliefs, letting go of old organizational shapes, team shapes, societal shapes, and doing the work to really metabolize and complete those shapings, as opposed to just trying to create something over top of them. The third way, sorry, I'm literally overheating myself, so I just had, it's like 85 degrees in my office all of a sudden. The third element is creation. And we say creation never is really true creation unless we've done that middle part, which is to complete, to let go, to metabolize, to digest. Something that humans can be really averse to individually because it's terrifying, and societies seem completely allergic to. And it's why we end up repeating patterns. That which is not digested will repeat. It's a law, so to speak. So that's a bit about what's underneath the way we orient to people. You're on mute. Now it's your turn to be on mute.
I'm just practicing, so I sound okay when it's my turn, okay?
Oh, okay, very good.
Yeah, there you go. So just a couple of things I wanted to say on that. And you'll see us, speaking of context, over our small time with you, we're going to increasingly contextualize our comments. I promise we're going to get there on team coaching. The context thing that Jen mentioned, I often say that to leadership and exec teams, like you are creating the context and inviting others into it. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but there's also a physiological co-regulation context, the body context you're inviting people into. And then the second thing, Jen, around completion that I feel like is worth mentioning, because so many of these people work with leadership and executive teams, is very often our attention is on what's in the space that doesn't seem like it's coming from any of the human beings that are present. And so often we step into newly formed teams or executive teams that are trying to create together, but they have not completed the past chapter. The ghost of the CEO is lurking the hallways. The pain that they caused, the habits that they encouraged, the behaviors that they encouraged and discouraged are still very much alive, and the invisible influence is there because that step was missing. They're trying to step into a new paradigm without naming, completing, and moving past the last. So Jen, speaking of context, people talk about VUCA a lot. And I've heard you talk about a new distinction, Bonnie. And since we talk about context when we start working with teams, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing because you opened up something about what you just said about completion, and I just want to say this about the three levels at which we look at things. So you have a team, and that team may have ghosts in the room and may have a collective shape that's the shape of, say, the former CEO, right? Which and that shape may be, I don't know, it could be anything, you all know, right? And that shape may or may not be a generative shape. It may or may not really serve the future the new CEO and the new senior team is attempting to create. In addition to that, each of us has a shape. A shape we take under pressure, a shape we take when we feel safe. We live in shapes. We've become shaped by life. So you have my shape plus Nilesh's shape plus Gina's shape. And under pressure, all three of those shapes go into our historical shaping. We don't know anything about that from last year, Nilesh, but anyway, we go into our historical shapes. And then we're trying to create something about the future from those three historical shapes. So you have the people in the room and what they're bringing to the party. You have the history in the room and the shape of the room and what it's bringing to the party. And then you have the larger context, which is what in organizations we speak the little sort of the least about often, although this is a good segue. I didn't know how I was going to do it, Nilesh, but we'll go right to Bonnie from here. You have the larger context, right? And Nilesh mentioned VUCA. I'm sure most of you have heard that terminology about the world we're swimming in. And I just read, maybe some of you have heard of this futurist named James Cassio. Forgive me if I just destroyed your last name. And he wrote an article called Facing the Age of Chaos. And he distinguished the acronym, the latest acronym. And the latest acronym is BANI, B-A-N-I, brittle, anxious. I don't have it memorized yet. Nonlinear and incomprehensible. Brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. And I have to say, selfishly, when I read that, I thought really somatic intelligence is even more and more required if that's the larger context. If it's incomprehensible and we rely completely on our intellect, on our cognition, we're not actually going to get at how to move skillfully. If truly we're living in, there's this book, I think it's called like The Anxious Nation, something, right?
Anxious generation.
The Anxious Generation, right? Literally, if that's the soup we're in, anxiety is a physiological, emotional, you could even say a spiritual phenomena, and you cannot have a good logical conversation and get out of it. Brittle's like a quality. So how do you, in the context of brittle, begin to work with a team to, I don't know, I was thinking about like, well, what's the antidote to brittle? And I thought water, because brittle is like really dry, right? Brittle is really dry, so water. And water is belonging, and it's flow, and it's emotion. Ah, don't say that word. So if we buy what he's selling, which I kind of did, right? Instinctually, I did. I haven't done a huge investigation into it, but it landed in me like, oh, okay, that feels actually like today's soup, and it feels somewhat distinct from the VUCA soup. Yeah, I'm getting a few head nods. Just felt like, oh yeah, there's been a shift. Maybe this isn't the final word on the matter, but it felt like we were starting to get at it through what he's saying. Then how are we gonna attend to it in the context of the team room?
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay.
I mean, one other thing that I think we want to bridge into talking a bit about the system as we've started to step into in the biological system. And I will say, we wanted to offer a few quotes that are words we live by. So the first quote is from Bruce Lee, and it's under duress, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our practice. We take that quote and then we build on top of it. We are what we practice, and we are always practicing something. So again, under duress, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training or practice. That's a Bruce Lee quote. And then we are what we practice, and we're always practicing something. And that comes from our friend, Richard Strozzi. And so then the question that naturally leads us to for teams, for individuals, is what are you practicing right now? And for each of us, I say this to groups, to teams, when I even lead workshops, I start here and I ask them, where is your attention? Are you practicing right now, figuring out if Nilesh is credible? And is that part of your intention to figure out if the speaker is credible? Or are you asking yourself, my intention is to become a force of change in the world. How is this moment allowing for me to practice moving in that direction? So that to some extent, and talking about it now, might be an invitation to you to notice your awareness for the rest of the time we're together. But Jen, I'd love for you to add on a bit as well to that, if you'd like.
So one of the things I often say when I'm sharing what Nilesh just shared is practice is, it's jargony. Most people don't think they're practicing anything moment to moment like that, unless you're in the gym or you're at your musical instrument, then we start thinking we're practicing. So you could substitute habit, unconscious or conscious habit. It's really the same thing. It's just a little sexier said the other way, I guess. But you are practicing, and everyone in the team room, if we stay in the context of the work Corentus is delivering, everyone is practicing a breath pattern. And that breath pattern either puts their physiology into stress or it puts their physiology at rest. They're practicing a relational pattern, an attachment pattern. They're an armoring pattern. They're practicing a listening pattern. Nilesh, are they listening for, are these people credible? Are they listening for tripping up the facilitator? When you're in the team room with them, how are they oriented to you? Is all the attention on you instead of on them? I live in a co-housing community, and people here are famous for skewering the facilitator versus looking at ourselves. It's like a very fabulous habit this group has, right? So that they're practicing something. They're practicing deflecting their attention from whatever's primarily very uncomfortable to let me take all my attention and place it over here so I don't have to attend to this right now. Okay. And then you take my version of all that, one human's version of all that, and then that person sitting next to some other version of all that, and another version of all that, and another version of all that, and you have a team who is practicing mostly until they're conscious, until they've worked with the likes of us or you or anyone in this room. They're practicing something that's usually historical, undistinguished, and is likely to betray the future they say they want. And it's why we can't just talk our way to a new future, because we're trained in what we have. We're trained to have what we have. We're trained by life. We're trained by our parents. We're trained by culture. We're trained by a brain that's fundamentally an archive of the past. We're trained by all those things, and then that's what will win. That's a promise of our biology and our physiology. It will win under pressure. And I don't know about you, but every team we work with, every leader I'm working with, the pressure they're under, the pressure all of us are under collectively as a human community, but the pressure that these organizational leaders are under, and to my mind, seems super ill-equipped to contend with, especially the larger questions they now have to answer about politics and climate and AI and the future of life on Earth and racism and gender and all. Like, they're just like, I just wanted to run a balance sheet and make a bunch of money and do something good for, you know, the product I'm selling. And now you actually have to have a geopolitical analysis. That's pressure. That's the very definition of pressure on the system that we are, and it will evoke what is most deeply neurologically, physiologically, psychologically wired in you, like it or not. And until and unless people have, and you all know this, I would imagine, until we have practices. And you know, the heart coherence practice that Alexander teaches is the beginning, not the beginning, it is one co-regulation practice that allows teams to actually start to cultivate a different body. It needs to go along with lots of other practices that allow people to co-regulate in different ways. But it is one of the practices that builds a shared nervous system that can withstand the kinds of pressures that we're under. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I am in my own black belt test with my practices. Like, I'm like, okay, you thought you were good? You thought you were good, girlfriend? Well, right now, if you think you're good, if you think you know how to practice, this is your moment. This is your moment. And in the embodied leadership work, which is one of the lineages I come from, we talk about being in what's called a randori, which is a part of an Aikido student's black belt test, where you receive multiple incoming attackers. And the work in the moment is, how do I actually stay, the distinction is centered, but how do I stay really inside myself, inhabiting myself, and being able to skillfully move and respond to what's coming at me. And right now the randori's, 24/7 and 365. So that's black belt level practice.
Yeah, just one quick thing to say about the randori, not being an expert at it, but because the world is moving so fast, most of us are accustomed to using a lot of our energy and moving off center to block the first attacker, to use the analogy. And so the randori is a test of that, the capacity to finish one thing and already basically be ready for the other in a millisecond or in no time at all. Let's finish really quickly with, I'm not even going to call it a case study because that would overblow the amount of detail I'm going to give, but it's an invitation. I want to share how we look at situations, and it's an invitation to you all the next time you're with the team to invite a part of yourself, a sensing, a noticing, an embodiment as a practitioner. So I was with a team, real story, anonymized, of course, and they're an executive team of a company. Each of us probably uses them at least a couple times a year, if not more. And I'm in the room for the first time, and I notice, and I'm tracking communication. There's some things they want to work on. I'm trained by Corentus. I'm looking at speech acts. I'm looking at requests. I'm looking at interruptions. I'm looking at conversational geometry. I'm noticing all of that. And then I'm also feeling really uncomfortable in the room and feeling my breath getting shallow. And I'm looking around at what's happening to the bodies. And in addition to voices and pace speeding up and voices getting louder, there's shrinking happening in the room. There's contraction. Some folks are getting bigger. Some are getting smaller. And then there's an eruption. One person with this almost crescendo moment of this dialogue going back and forth. It's almost like if there were 3 spotlights, they would hit 3 of the people. The other 3 have almost vanished into fetal position. I'm exaggerating, right? It's not that drastic. It's actually more common, but I am exaggerating. So it's like a conversation that might be happening with teams all the time. And there's a lot of moves that can be made there. Me as a coach, I'm actually using, from a somatic standpoint, I'm noticing their bodies, but I'm noticing mine because I'm in relationship with them in that moment in the room, despite not knowing them well. And there's moves we can make there, and there's moves we could choose not to make. And so briefly, Jen, I'll share a couple of thoughts and then also ask for you too, and then let's take questions after that. But in many cases, the move might be to stop the moment, to intervene, to ask them what they're noticing, which I think really works. And there's an underlying biological process happening when the heat gets that high, being in mammalian bodies, that actually requires us to get our buns out of the seat in order to not have that moment be one that lasts, that gets unmetabolized, and that becomes something broken that we continue to try to build upon as a team. And so in this case, I'm like, holy shit, what's happening here? And we just do a timeout, and I ask everyone to move their bodies. And is that the best move? Not sure, but it is a move through a different lens. So Jen, would just love your take on when you're in moments like that, what's your move?
I'm going to give you my classic answer, which is it depends.
Perfect. With that, we'll take questions. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, great. We could.
No, I'm kidding.
It
I'm
does.
kidding.
It totally depends on how much, how many distinctions they have, and
Yes.
and all of those kinds of things, and how woo-woo I can get, and how not, and how scientific, and am I introducing something or not? But I think the fundamental move, regardless of what comes after, is I notice myself feeling the urge to shrink, or I notice myself having a contraction in my stomach as this conversation goes on. And I'm curious what's happening in the other stomachs in the room. And then from there, there's a lot of it depends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing I'll say to that before we take questions is, for me, the biggest learning leaving a very cerebral and heady career at big financial institutions as the person running coaching and team effectiveness and blah, 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 was the amount of data that is often available that is this essence of who we are, that is not acted upon and that's ignored to our own detriment. And so using this whole sensing essence of who we are through the body, and Jen, you and I talked about this, like, and that's why we try to put breaks between every client, like basically rinsing off the context we came from so that we can be clean and clear for this context, and we aren't misinterpreting the stuff in the room as their stuff when it's ours, and just using all of this up and down to make observations, and that's not necessarily conclusions. I think that aligns with what you said. All right, what do we got? How do we do questions? How do you prefer? I know we went a little over with the talk.
It's okay. If anyone is great. Thank you so much. Very, very insightful. Anyone want to come off mute? Mr. Kincaid.
First of all, thank you. That was beyond enlightening for me. I'm a newbie to this whole field of what you're practicing and doing and have studied. I'm wondering how you relate what you just said to maybe it's one layer up. I'm going to use a growth stock investing analogy. One layer up to me is given the somatics of what you're sensing with your body, it produces certain emotions. In the case of a growth stock investor, those emotions are hope, fear, pride, and greed. And knowing which emotions the somatics are producing enables me in the growth stock investing example to know exactly how I should behave to minimize the impact of that emotion. So I'm wondering how you take what I love the somatic intelligence idea. How do you take that and turn it into something that's actionable in terms of how you that would help you then change your behavior? Because if I can go a level up and if I know the emotions that it's driving inside me, then I know what actions I should be taking so that those emotions don't control my behavior in the wrong direction.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction to the year-long course.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm going to say three things really fast. One, in the discourse of somatic leadership, or some people call it somatic coaching, other people call it embodied leadership, founded by Richard Strozzi Heckler and Robert Hall, but Richard Strozzi Heckler is really known for it. There are three aspects of the teaching. One is you're building awareness. We all know if you're not aware of something, you can't do anything about it, right? So building awareness and having your clients build awareness, right? Like if I ask them what's going on in their gut and they're like, gut? I had a gut? I didn't even know I have a gut. I mean, literally, there are many, many people I have asked over the last 30 years to feel what is going on below the neck, and they cannot do it at the beginning. That's how disconnected, dismembered, dissociated we are from the wholeness of ourselves. So first you build awareness, and there's a million practices out there to build awareness. So you teach them to become aware observers of what's actually happening now. And then there's a process called unwinding, and that's best demonstrated through body work, really. But there are all ways to have unwinding practices. But the laying down work, which gets taught less and less in his discourse now, but was pretty much primary in the old days, is where you really intervene in the shaping, the chronic holding pattern, the chronic way of being organized around myself and around you. And I have a chronic way of doing that. We all do. And so the unwinding practice gives me some other new home base, some other way to find a place to land inside myself that, is distinguished as center. And there's tons of things to say about center in and of itself. And then the last thing is practice. We are what we practice, and we're always practicing something. So when I'm with a client or a team, what is the body we're building? Okay, jargon again. But what is the body we're building? What's the shape we're building? What's the future we're intending? And what's the body, the shape, and the nervous system that goes with that future? And then there are practices that you invite a single client or a team or group into that begin to cultivate. It's like going to the gym. I mean, to be callous about it, it's gym. And then you practice those things to build the body, to build the nervous system, to build the shape, and to have the narrative, the story we tell, and the body we are begin to line up. Okay, and all of that requires a lot of distinguishing in and of itself.
Wow.
And Mike, I don't want to belabor the point, but just real quick, I'll give you an example. I had a client, CEO of a company, had some challenges that were stated around engaging the board and difficult conversations with the team. So I'm with the team, and I noticed that every time the temperature gets high, shoulders come in, and I was able to kind of lean back. And he, if anyone is a yogi here, he had his legs basically in eagle pose below the table. So it's a lot of contraction and tightening and making himself small to try to have some harmony in the room. So after that session, we had a coaching session because I work with the individual too. And we just started by noticing. Like I said, hey, I'm not attached to this observation, but I noticed twice when the temperature got high, you got really small. And so then for a period of time, of course he understands some of the history behind it, but he sought to understand some of the history. And to some extent, he could probably make some changes without being an expert in the history. But his practice was a noticing practice for a period of time. And then we introduced the distinctions of length, width, and depth. So he has an awareness where his body is in space and how it's moving, contracting, expanding. And he was doing daily practice, as Jen said, workouts every single day. And then started trying on new behaviors. And so anytime the temperature got high, tapped into length, width, and depth. It was like, okay, I can feel my feet on the floor, breath in the belly, shoulders are out. And then he did some practice back and forth that we've done too. It's small. So he knows, like battle tested, and increasing the practice that feels more like the real life moment that the person finds himself in high stakes dialogue with honestly people of less structural power and more structural power. Just the urge to please is so high. So I don't know if that's a helpful
both answers were very
example.
helpful. Thank you very much.
And
Do we have time
Jen
for Kate?
Jen and Nilesh, can you stay for a couple more minutes to answer Kate's question? But I want to have everyone give you come off mute, give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for being our thought leaders today. Super, super inspiring as well as informative. Full body informative. So thank you for that. And with that, Kate.
I'm sorry, I know we're out of time, but Jen, when you were talking about historical shapes, it made me think about team culture and how team culture can be kind of cemented in a team, even if team members are leaving, even if the whole team turns over. So that's where my brain went. So I'm just curious, if we're working with people on their shapes, is that a way to shift culture?
Yeah. One of the basic tenets of systems theory is structure shapes behavior, right? So you can pull a person or even the entire team out of their roles, stick new people in the roles, and because we're actually fundamentally energetic and somatic people, enter those roles, and all of a sudden all the behaviors start to reappear.
Yeah.
Right? So there are lots of levels to look at how a culture has been cemented. I like your word, because that's what happens. Things get hardened and brittle and cemented in. And then you get to ask all the question, where are the ghosts? What's incomplete from before? In what way does the larger organizational shape make it impossible for the team shape to really shift in some fundamental way? There are lots of places to look using this lens still of somatics and asking a series of questions. And then you build practices based on that set of analysis. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.
And with that, thank you so much. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to sort of meet you.
Your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your February.
Thank you so much.
Join us next month. And thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, Jen.